Here we have two of the most common Wasatch foothill wildflowers, Balsamorhiza sagittata, the Arrowleaf Balsamroot, and Wyethia Amplexicaulis, the Northern Mules Ear. Both are very similar to each other but are in fact different species, so how do you tell the two apart? Let's jump right into that. Firstly though, I think it's important to discuss how the two genera as a whole differ from each other, and to do that, it's hard not to talk about just how similar they are. They are not only a part of the same family of plants, the sunflower family, but they are part of the same subfamily, tribe, and even subtribe. And in fact, genetic testing has shown that they are each other's closest relatives, which I think is pretty interesting. Now, to list all the characteristics they have in common would be way too long for one video, and without using botanical nomenclature, it's a bit hard to explain what they are. But to list just a few of them, using botanists' own terms, just for fun, these two plant genera share persistent phyllories, ray florets that are both bisexual and fertile, a lack of plumose bristles on the achenes, and chaffy receptacles. Yeah. Fortunately, this is not too important to know, and what is important is much easier to understand, namely the differences between the two. For Balsamorhiza, or the balsam roots, they have leaves that are entirely basal without any leaves growing on the flower stem, or if they do, they are highly reduced and very sparse, as you can see here. To show that this is a common characteristic of the genus, let's look at another member of Balsamorhiza you can find right here in the Wasatch foothills. This plant is Balsamorhiza hookeri, also known as Hooker's Balsamroot, which is a pretty hilarious plant name, but regardless, though the leaves look very different to that of the Arrowleaf Balsamroot, just like that plant, there is a lack of leaves growing on the stem, which, along with the fact that the flowers are almost identical between these two species, unites them in the genus Balsamorhiza. It is a common feature of Balsamorhiza that there are no leaves, or if they are, very small and highly reduced leaves growing on the flower stem. Wyethias, on the other hand, or mule's ears, in addition to usually having basal leaves, always have calling leaves, or leaves that grow on the flower stem. And although they're not exactly the same size as the basal leaves, they aren't that much smaller and they're about the same shape. Let's look at what separates the two in specific, starting with Balsamorhiza sagittata. Look at the leaf shape. It's like an arrow, or sagittate as botanists would refer to it, and this is in particular a reference to the fact that they recurve, like has these lobes pointing back at the point of attachment of the leaf stem to the leaf blade. See how it is right there? These lobes pointing back, and then tapers to a point just like an arrowhead, and the leaf sort of then curves in on itself a little bit, like towards the center. Look also at the color of the leaf on the underside. It's sort of lightish blue, and this is because the plants are covered in a fine, downy layer of white hairs, especially on the underside, giving it an illusion of being this lightest blue color. Also noteworthy is that the petiole is longer, or at least as long as the leaf blade is typically. I mean, it's a pretty long leaf, but I do believe the petioles in this species are longer. Now, if we look at the Wyethia Amplexicaulis, you'll notice firstly that the color is different. It's a typical dark green as any good plant should be. And the leaf stem is almost non-existent. The actual blade of the leaf continues all the way to the base of the plant. And the leaf is actually shaped sort of like a feather, I think. Sort of slowly widens and then tapers back down to a point. And it also has a sort of undulating margin, as you can see right here. That's unlike the inward curving of the upper plant. I also want to make sure you guys are aware that Wyethia Amplexicaulis can get quite a lot larger than the one I was using for most of the video. This guy I found is, I think, a little bit over 3 feet tall, and you can see it's a pretty big guy. And that one has some pretty large leaves, at least almost like, what, 1.5 feet long. So they can get quite large, much larger than that one little guy was using, but it was very convenient just where it's positioned right next to Balsamorhiza sagittata. Now, these few features I showed today, the presence or absence of leaves on the flower stem, as well as differences in leaf shape, size, color, and leaf stem length, I think are all a pretty good basis to identify the two from each other, but there are some other important characteristics to know, namely the fact that Balsamorhiza sagittata tends to bloom earlier than Wyethia Amplexicaulis. You can see most of the ones we found were just wrapping up their flowering season, while Wyethia Amplexicaulis is enjoying full bloom right now. That lovely sunflower shape. Also important to know is that Wyethia Amplexicaulis tends to grow in more shaded, partially shaded areas, while Balsamorhiza sagittata grows in open sunlight more often. Now, depending on where you live, you might have just these two species, or you might have some other species. You might have these two species and other species, and for that reason, knowing how to tell the two genera apart, I think, is very important, because you want to know exactly what species you're talking about, right? Also important to note is that there's a few look-alike genera that might confuse you as well. Most notable around here, at least, is Arnica, a genus of quite a few species in Utah, but notably a few in the foothills, which unfortunately I can't find any today. And just like Wyethia, they have leaves that grow on the stem, but unlike Wyethia, the leaves on the Arnicas are always opposite to each other, while on Wyethia they are alternate to each other. So they are still fairly easy to tell apart if you know what to look for. I hope you learned something from this video. Thanks for watching and see you next time.